The Terrifying Lies Podcast, with music and stories by Craig Nybo. Greetings, friends, and welcome back to the Terrifying Lies Podcast, where we explore the blackest recesses of the soul. I'm Craig Nybo, your host. Man, I'm glad to be here, and even better, I'm glad you are here. I hope you've been enjoying Red Annex, the continuing serial of a special ops mission gone wrong. Before we dive in, I want to make sure that you know about my online store. You can find it at craignybo.com and clicking on the store link at the top of the site. Over the years, I've made a lot of stuff. You'll find about 30 finished projects there, including novels, music, and board games. On that note, when it comes to making stuff, I encourage you to roll up your sleeves, put something out there. Could be a book, could be an album, or could be an old muscle car restoration. Whatever it is you have to offer, time to stand and deliver. The world is a pretty dreary place. Filling with projects of passion does nothing but lift everyone's spirits. When it comes to today's story, I have good news and bad news. Initially, I thought this one was going to run 7 episodes. That would put today's edition as the conclusion. The bad news is, the story doesn't conclude today. The good news is, you're going to get more of Red Annex, at least 2 more episodes. Hey, what can I say? I'm flying by the seat of my pants here. If you haven't listened from the beginning, I encourage you to go back to the top of Season 4 and tune in. This is a pretty epic story, and I think you might be confused if you jump into the middle. To catch you up a bit, as they say, previously on Red Annex, a plague that causes insanity and cannibalism lands in America. The President of the United States reacts by throwing up annexes around the infected zones. A U.S. Army Special Forces team flies into the San Fernando Valley Annex on a recon and rescue mission. They carry an experimental vaccine. Their orders: survey the area, vaccinate, and rescue as many survivors as possible. Their plans collapse when they make contact with hostiles inside the annex. Orton, the commanding officer, breaks his team into 3 groups. One, to head to an old church where non-hostiles have holed up. Another, to see to a pesky sniper cage atop a Union 76 ball marquee. Orton leads the 3rd team to find and recover 3 lost soldiers from his unit. And now, let's find out what happens next on Red Annex, Part 7. Remember to stay tuned for a new song at the end of the story. I'll see you on the other side. Chapter 20. Extraction time minus 23 minutes. Peltier, Tuttle, motorcycle jacket, and tattoos. The First Salvation Christian Center's hardwood double doors splintered under the strain of continued pounding. The dogs outside struck with makeshift weapons foraged from the wreckage. Tuttle stood among the score of refugees waiting for Peltier and her enlisted volunteers to finish the injection. The chapel's rear doors slammed open. Tuttle wheeled around and aimed his MK-16 down the long hallway toward the loading dock doors. Tattoos entered, nearly slamming Lacey, the Christian Center's office manager and rear entry lookout, into the wall. She'd done nothing but let him in and been squeezed between steel door and brick for her trouble. Tattoos apologized to her as he shut the door behind him. He turned and spotted Tuttle. "They're coming!" Tuttle lowered his weapon. "I'm pretty sure they're already here." Tuttle gestured over his shoulder at the barricaded chapel entrance. "They're coming from the back, too. They'll surround us in the next 5 minutes." Tattoos walked the long hallway and entered the chapel. "How much longer is this gonna take?" Tuttle asked Peltier. "Just a few more," she said as she injected a middle-aged man with graying brown hair. "Is there a discreet route to Tongva Park?" Tuttle asked Tattoos. "Why Tongva Park?" Tattoos asked. "Transport will land there." Tuttle checked his wristwatch. 23 minutes. "No way to get there without crossing open ground." Tuttle pursed his lips After a moment's thought, he drew his Beretta M9 and offered it to Tattoos.
You're right. We're way past discretion.
Tattoos hesitated for a beat before taking the pistol.
Keep your finger off the trigger, unless you intend to kill someone.
The words made Tuttle sick as he said them. How had things spun so far out of control?
I'll get us to Tongva Park,
Tattoos said, holding the pistol, barrel down, at his side. Tuttle turned to the mass of refugees.
It's time to go. If you've been inoculated, into the hallway now. We're heading out the back way.
Just a handful more, Peltier said.
Finish up and take the rear,
Tuttle ordered. Peltier and 2 volunteers injected the last few refugees, while the others filed out of the chapel into the hallway. After the last injection, Peltier ushered the others through the door before taking up the rear. She shot a glance over her shoulder toward the barricaded front entrance before leaving. She caught movement in one of the rear pews. Someone sat there in the shadows.
Come on, we gotta move, she said.
Sobs came from the individual in the back of the chapel. Peltier huffed an impatient sigh and crossed the room. When she got to the rear pew, she found a little girl, no older than 8. Tears and dirt soiled her cheeks. She held a plush unicorn in her lap. The chapel's front doors pounded, causing the little girl to jump. Peltier sat down next to her.
What's your name?
Gracie, the little girl said, trying to swallow her sobs, so severe that they had turned into uncontrollable hiccups.
Did you get a shot, Gracie? I'm scared it's gonna hurt. Where are your parents? I don't know, Gracie said, clutching down tight on her unicorn.
What's his name? Peltier asked.
Mr. Twinkles.
Well, what do you say we give Mr. Twinkles a shot first? Then he won't get sick. People are getting very sick around here. I wouldn't want that to happen to him. Gracie's eyes widened as Peltier drew a spent syringe from her pocket and reached out for the plush unicorn. After a moment's hesitation, Gracie swallowed her fear and handed Mr. Twinkles over. Peltier carefully poked the spent syringe into the plush unicorn and petted a tuft of hair between its ears.
There you go, Mr. Twinkles.
Now that didn't hurt at all, did it? Gracie nodded and reached out for Mr. Twinkles. Peltier drew out an unused syringe and peeled back the sanitary packaging. Now it's your turn. I know you can be a brave girl. Gracie recoiled at first, but after a moment, she offered her shoulder. Peltier injected the little girl. Gracie winced but forced herself through it without shedding a tear.
We gotta go,
Motorcycle Jack shouted from across the chapel. Peltier craned around and caught him standing at the exit. Urgency registered in his expression. She hefted up Gracie in her arms. Come on, little one. Let's get you somewhere safe. Peltier snatched up her backpack and rifle and cut across the chapel toward the hallway. Tuttle led the refugees down the rear exit of the Christian Center. He put an ear to the door before throwing open the deadbolt. He followed his MK-16 barrel out into the loading dock and cleared the area. No insurgents met him in the alley.
Which way?
He uttered over his shoulder at Tattoos. There! Tattoos pointed up the alley in the opposite direction from which he had come.
I'm gonna need you to take point. Get ahead of these people and bring them directly to Tongva Park. I'll put Peltier in the rear. I'm gonna fall back and see if I can slow them down.
You're staying here? Tattoos said.
Go, now,
Tuttle ordered. Tattoos nodded once and led the way down a handful of stairs, siding the loading dock. The refugees filed in behind him. Peltier came out last, holding Gracie in her arms.
Watch their 6,
Tuttle said to Peltier.
Tattoos will lead you to the extraction point.
He worked the Velcro fasteners on the plate carrier at his belly as he spoke.
Get them to safety. I'm gonna set an ambush.
Peltier glanced down at his pouch and caught sight of what Tuttle intended to use. She looked into his eyes for a long moment.
Get with them. They need you. I'll catch up or meet you at the extraction point. Those are your orders.
Peltier pursed her lips, nodded, and fell in behind the refugees, Gracie still in her arms. As the others moved away, Tuttle worked the flap on his plate carrier and drew out a pair of M18A1 Claymore mines, along with their detonators. Distant shouting came from far up the alley. For all of his lanky, skinny self, Tattoos had succeeded in giving Tuttle a little warning of approaching hostiles.
Based on the voices' distance, Tuttle estimated that he had less than a minute to work before they arrived. He sprinted up the alley toward the fleeing refugees, already almost out of sight. He set his first claymore on the lee side of a dumpster. The mine would easily cover the alley's breadth. He swallowed hard as he synced the remote detonator with the claymore. Setting off the mine would raise the rules of engagement. He'd be willingly firing on Americans. He hesitated for a handful of seconds, swearing under his breath. Finally, he stilled himself and set the code that armed the device. He sprinted further up the alley, keeping to the shadows. The approaching mob of hostiles rounded a distant corner and approached the Christian Center. Tuttle set the second claymore next to a jutting piece of masonry behind a vintage record shop. Platinum Records, the aged letters read, printed on an awning over the rear entrance of the shop. He armed the device and ran further up the alley until he found cover in a nook behind a Chinese restaurant 3 doors from the second claymore. He leaned out until he could establish a line of sight with the hostiles. At least 24 dogs had gathered behind the Christian Center. It wouldn't take them long to realize that the refugees had left the building. Tuttle bided his time, hoping that Peltier and the others had made some distance toward the extraction point. After trying the lock, several hostiles beat on the door with their weapons. Lengths of wood, pipes, all the better, Tuttle thought. More getaway time. Someone in the dog ranks took up the mantle of leadership. He enlisted a handful of the mob to help him pick up a concrete parking bumper from one of the printed stalls behind the Christian Center. Even from where Tuttle crouched, looking out from around the corner of a Chinese restaurant, he could see them struggle with the weight of the thing. The dogs worked together, carrying the length of concrete up the half-dozen steps onto the loading dock. They lined up on the door, working the concrete around into battering position. After a 3 count, they ran at the door. One collision sent the door off its hinges. A collective shout of triumph erupted from the group as the battering crew dropped the concrete. Some, in the front line, entered the Christian Center. "Here we go," Tuttle said under his breath. After less than a minute, the advanced scouts exited onto the loading dock with their report. No refugees remained in the Christian Center. The crowd gathered into a knot on the street and cut through the alleyway behind the buildings toward Tuttle. Tuttle held his breath as the mob neared the first Claymore's blast radius. He didn't want to push the transmitter's ignition button. His sweaty hand resisted, but at some point, he had to separate the sheep from the goats. The crew of dogs would undoubtedly kill and probably eat every one of the refugees under his and Peltier's protection. He flipped the safety on the remote detonator, kept his eyes on the approaching dogs. More of them poured into the alley. The throng swelled into a horde. Tuttle noticed the red rashes around their necks. He wondered if society could ever readmit them. Maybe this act would grant them a form of peace. Peace in death, he justified. He pushed the button. Heat, trash, and white dust filled the alley just ahead of the approaching dogs. To his dying moment, Tuttle wouldn't forget how the front throng of infected humanity blew apart in a mist of blood and tissue. The explosion warped the ground, causing it to shift, and Tuttle thought, lean a bit to the side for a moment. Tuttle hoped the dogs would stop their advance, but his hopes turned to ghosts as he heard a renewed marshal of rage rise through the pained moans and sobbing that came from the blast zone. Tuttle crouched low and watched. The dogs advanced, slowed by the first blast. Tuttle took measured breaths as they weaved their way through the debris. As they entered the second blast radius, Tuttle didn't hesitate. He removed the detonator's safety and pushed the button. The second Claymore sent a dumpster flying, along with a barrage of steel balls and incidental debris and shrapnel. The second blast wrought even more destruction. Bodies flew apart, parts of them slamming into a 10-foot-high chain-link fence. Pieces of humans hung from the now red-painted galvanized wire like drying game. Someone's leg, dressed in an Adidas track pant, hung from the top of the fence. Its foot made a few final twitches before going limp. Tuttle moved out. He hoped the dogs had lost their bite. Either way, carried no more claymores. More stalling would mean face-to-face contact. He sped up the alley to the point where he expected tattoos to lead the refugees across 7th Street and straight on to Tongva Park. Chapter 21. Extraction time minus 8 minutes. Orton, Wills, Wilmore. Inky faltered as he crossed the mat toward Wilmore. Not only did he falter, he also shook his head as if trying to clear away the cobwebs in his brain. A stem-packed crash cloud loomed over the diseased fighter. Wilmore raised his fists and moved on his tattooed rival. Inky lumbered off a right hook. Wilmore defused the blow by punching Inky's shoulder and blocking the punch with his forearm. He planted a hand behind Inky's neck and pulled. Inky's downward-moving face made contact with Wilmore's upward-moving knee. The first 3 rows of spectators heard Inky's skull crack. They voiced a pain moan on behalf of their champion. Inky hit the mat in a pile of muscle and tattoos. He lulled over, knowing somewhere in his fogged mind that he had to get up. Just as he put an elbow under his girth, Wilmore came at him with a pair of hard kicks to the ribs. Inky collapsed onto his back. His face, a mangled mass of slippage and gore, looked up at the halogen lights high above the ring. The crowd booed. They ordered Inky to get up and fight. Wilmore lifted one of the big man's arms and turned him onto his belly. Inky flopped face down, spread eagle. Wilmore lifted one boot over Inky's neck and brought it down. His boot hit the mat next to Inky's head. Langevin's face melted into cold vitriol. He glanced at Orton and Wills. Orton shrugged. Langevin crimped down on his microphone and ducked under the ropes. He made his way to center ring. It seems by an ostensible show of generosity that Challenger has decided to spare the champ's life. The American PR machine continues to crank out its supposed goodwill. But I'm telling you, my dear viewers, this changes nothing. Red Ring is coming for you. It will jump this wall and visit every community in every city across the United States. It will arch over the oceans and descend on every country. Make no mistake, this disease is man-made, and it will be the end of men. Langevin turned to Wilmore. Now to the issue at hand. This match was to be a battle to the death, and so someone must die. Therefore, on behalf of the free world, I hereby exercise my right to revolution. Accordingly, I designate as the new Republic's first summarily executed tyrant, Sergeant Wilmore of the whatever the hell U.S. Special Forces Unit. Langevin drew a .38 from his waistband and aimed it at Wilmore. You should have killed him, soldier. Let's move, Orton said to Wills. Wills and Orton drew their pistols and shot the 2 closest hostiles, snatching up the dying men's weapons as they dropped. Wilmore ran for the ropes as Langevin pulled the trigger, missing by a short margin. Wills turned his pistol on the nearest threat while Orton tossed a 9mm to Wilmore. Wilmore caught the gun as he bounced off the ropes, using the momentum to launch him toward Langevin. At the back of the hall, Henry cut Giesing free. They used the ringside firefight as a distraction to move through the crowd. As the spectators crowded forward to get their teeth into the action, Henry and Giesing made it to the munitions table. Between them, they hooked up 4 MK-16s. Stupid of them to leave all these toys out, Henry thought as he slung one rifle over his shoulder and racked the other. He touched off his first 3 rounds into a man holding what looked like a Dirty Harry-styled .44 Magnum. Giesing answered Henry, shot for shot. Wilmore pistol-whipped Langevin as he ran by. The reporter hit the mat, blood exploding from a fresh blunt force head wound. He whined and cupped one hand on his crown while reaching for his microphone with the other. Wilmore stopped at the other side of the ring and aimed at Langevin's chest. He put his finger on the trigger. He sidled over to where Langevin had dropped his gun and hooked it up. He kept the weapon on Langevin and touched off 2 shots with the other into 2 hostiles brave enough to advance on the ring. The 2 men dropped like sandbags. At least a dozen dogs lay dead before Langevin shouted into the PA system, "Stop!" down your weapons! This isn't the way! Everyone ceased fire, but kept their weapons up. Wilmore kept one pistol on Langevin. Should the reporter even glance wrong, it would end the man right there on the mat. Langevin stood up, keeping one hand on his bleeding head. He turned to Fast Eddie, still sitting behind the live casting station. "Keep those cameras rolling," he said, a runnel of saliva escaping the corner of his mouth and tracing down his unshaven chin. He walked to the edge of the ring toward Orton and leaned up against the ropes. Wilmore kept his aim. "And just how do you think this is gonna end? I have better than 30 men and women here, all bent on putting you down like cattle and having you for dinner." Orton aimed his pistol at the closest threat, a bearded man holding a hunting rifle in his diseased hands. He scanned the collection of humanity for anyone with misplaced intentions. "What you have is a bunch of sick, untrained lunatics. We came to help, but you've crossed a line that I fear is untractable." "It's all on film, cowboy. Every word, every punch, every bullet into every innocent chest." "Wilmore," Orton said. Wilmore looked up from his aim. Orton gestured toward the munitions table with a flick of his chin. Wilmore spotted what Orton had seen there. Keeping his aim on Langevin, he made his way to the edge of the ring and slipped through the ropes. Orton covered Langevin with his pistol. "I see anything but innocence here, Langevin. You can keep your cameras rolling. You can pipe out whatever twisted propaganda you want. But that look in your bloodshot eyes, that insatiable thirst for human flesh that I can almost taste just by looking at you, the world is gonna recognize you for what you are. Nothing but a vampire. If there's one thing I know about people when it comes to getting into the fight, nothing motivates them like self-preservation. We tried to help, but you didn't want help. All you want is ratings. I can guarantee you're gonna get them. Hell, everyone loves to watch a train wreck. But sympathy for your so-called revolution, that raven has left the dying branch. You're forgetting about something else the people love." "What's that?" "They love an underdog." Crowd parted for Wilmore as he made his way to the munitions table. He found his M249 saw. He holstered the 9mm, put Langevin's .38 on the table, and hefted up the 18-pound machine gun and extra 200-round magazine. Orton raised his voice to address everyone. "My friend there, Sergeant Wilmore, has reacquainted himself with his old friend. It's called the Saw. He can make it through 800 rounds of ammunition per minute. I don't think there are 800 assholes here in this room. I assure you, he's been well trained. He doesn't miss. So I advise you to keep it cool." He turned to Langevin. "You asked how I think this is gonna end? Here's my answer. I'm gonna take Fast Eddie over there." Orton aimed a pistol at the man behind the streaming station. Fast Eddie raised his hands high and shifted in his chair. "He's gonna show me where my fallen soldiers are being processed. After that, we're gonna pack them out of here and take them home to their families." Orton gestured with his offhand for Fast Eddie to get up. "You're with us." Fast Eddie stood up so fast that his knees knocked over his chair. Keeping his hands high, he moved across the room through the mob to Orton. "Where are we headed?" Orton asked. "Showers, in the back," Fast Eddie said. Orton glanced at his men. "We'll move together. If even one of these asshats gets out of line, you may fire at will. Wilmore, keep us covered." Wilmore nodded and racked his saw. Wills, Henry, and Giesing fell into formation, keeping their weapons up, fingers off the triggers, scanning the room for anyone with any misplaced ideas. Wilmore followed behind, keeping his M249 ready. Fast Eddie led them through Garibaldi's. All eyes looked on in silence as they crossed the gym to a set of double doors in the back. Just before Fast Eddie pushed open the doors, Orton ordered him to stop. "Henry, Giesing, clear the room." Henry and Giesing moved to both sides of the door. Giesing pushed the latch and entered. Henry followed. Both men traced their M16s over every possible hiding place. "Clear!" both men shouted, one after the other. "Lead on, Fast Eddie," Orton said. Orton and his reduced company walked through the double doors into a hallway. Wilmore took up the rear. Wills found a pair of industrial brooms in a nearby closet and shoved them into the double doors' steel handles, blocking them from swinging into the hallway. With the doors secure, the small company advanced down a short corridor. Orton smelled the petulance of dead flesh as they neared the showers. Fast Eddie stopped just short of opening the shower doors. "It isn't me," he said, stuttering in fear. "It's the sickness. It takes you over. I'm so hungry." "Geesing and Henry clear the showers," Orton said. The two soldiers slammed the doors wide and entered one after the other, their guns panning the space for threats. The smell of dead flesh curled into the hall. "Commander, you need to see this," Henry said from within the showers. Orton, Wills, and Wilmore entered. They moved around the 3 racks of lockers and walked into the tiled shower area. Marwadell, Riggs, and Krell hung upside down from a series of galvanized steel pipes that crisscrossed the ceiling. They dangled there, shirtless, hands reaching down toward the drains. Blood pooled below them. Someone had unhooked them from their crucifixes behind the tow trucks and brought them here, cut them neck to waist, and cleaned them like fresh game. Orton struggled to avoid vomiting as he drew his knife and tossed it on the floor below Marwadell's suspended body. "Cut them down," he said to Fast Eddie. "It's the sickness," Fast Eddie said. "It isn't me." "Cut them down." Orton's voice reverberated in the shower room. Fast Eddie fumbled for the knife. He retrieved a short, folding ladder leaning against the wall. He set it up next to Marwadell's body, climbed to where he could access the ropes, and cut him down. Marwadell's body crumpled on the tiled floor, sloshing in the mixture of blood and bits of gore. Orton, Wills, Geesing, Henry, and Wilmore watched in silence as Fast Eddie cut down the other 2 men. Fast Eddie climbed down the ladder and offered the knife back to Orton, not knowing what else to do. "Kneel," Orton said. Fast Eddie's bottom lip quivered as he put one knee down in the pool of gore, then the other. He looked at the floor. Orton stepped closer and aimed at Fast Eddie's head. "Commander," Will said, "you don't want to do this." "You're animals," Orton said, restraining himself from touching the trigger. "And you should die like animals." The quiver in Fast Eddie's lips spread throughout his body. Soon, he shook from head to toe, as if a sudden case of Parkinson's disease come over him. A boom reverberated from up the hallway. Langevin and his infected cultists slammed against the double doors, trying to break the brooms placed by Sergeant Wills. Orton lowered his pistol. Fast Eddie glanced up at the commander, his eyes full of blood and tears. "Thank you," he uttered under his breath. "Let's get back to the extraction point," Orton said. "Is there a back way out of here?" Fast Eddie pointed. "Let's go." Wilmore, Wills, and Henry scooped up the bodies of their friends, much lighter with their organs removed. Fast Eddie led the 5 soldiers back into the hallway. The double doors to the gym slammed against the broom handles repeatedly. Wills thought he heard a crack as Fast Eddie led them another way. The 6 men jogged down another hallway to an exit. Fast Eddie pushed the doors wide, revealing Colorado Avenue. They moved out of the gym's front entrance. Orton ordered Fast Eddie inside and shut the steel door behind him. He and Geesing heaved against a dumpster until it begrudgingly rolled in front of the doors. "Won't hold him forever," Henry said. Orton checked his watch. "Only needs to hold him for 8 minutes. Let's get to the extraction point." Orton took point and led what remained of his small company up the street. They shared the load by taking turns lugging the 3 dead men. They traveled 2 blocks along Colorado Avenue, then cut toward Tongva Park. Orton hoped the other members of his detachment would be there to meet them when the Chinook put down.
We got a problem. We got a burning dumpster fire. We got all these people living on their thinnest wire. Plagued with infection, and the time is getting late. We got the injection, and it's time to inoculate. Acting like devils, living in the devil's hell. A lower level contagion. I burn gas on the masses without discrimination. Sickness over the classes. Not a soul can endure it, whether victim or an inflictor. Satiate the greedy ache, inoculate the passive state. Oh yeah, oh yeah. Roll over the weak ones without glancing over their shoulder. Don't make a big fuss because the prize goes to the boulder. Double down on the lightning and for sure be bringing the thunder. You're making it frightening and you'll never end the hunger. Don't fret on the small stuff, it's just kindling for the burning. It's gonna hurt, it's gonna be rough, and the times they are returning. Put your boot on the whiners and tell yourself it's okay. It ain't zilch, it ain't personal, it's just business every day. It's another contagion. I burn gas on the masses without discrimination. Sickness over the classes. Not a soul can endure it, whether victim or an inflictor. Satiate the greedy ache, inoculate the passive state. Oh yeah. Baby, only time will tell. 3 cheers for the white shirts. You can jog one down for the mighty. Raise a beer for the fight jerks. Take your haul and that's alrighty. So don't give me no griping. I'm only spreading out the facts now. Stop moaning, stop piping. It's a beheading blitz of backs now. You're gonna take just what they want now. They're gonna do just what they do. It's an animal swamp now, and the casualty is you. It's another contagion. I burn gas on the masses without discrimination. Sickness over the classes. Not a soul can endure it, whether victim or an inflictor. Satiate the greedy ache, inoculate the passive state. Oh yeah.
For the song Inoculate the Passive State, I went for a raw, less processed sound. I wanted it to grind like a garage hard rock band. The drummer, Roberto Iacona, listened to the minus tracks and said, I have just the thing. I'm gonna go all John Bonham on this one. Except he probably said it with an Argentinian accent. His drumming and the overdriven bass take up the center of the song, and a Hammond organ never hurts. I hope you liked it. Well, we've come to the end of yet another episode. We're halfway through the season now, and I can't believe it. Time flies, and I have so little time to spend with you. If I had it my way, I'd have you all over for a barbecue. I suppose I'll just have to be content connecting with you here on Terrifying Lies. Until next time, I bid you sweet dreams, or should I say, sweet nightmares.
This has been the Terrifying Lies podcast. Please, come again. You're welcome here.